Hello and welcome to the episode 4 of the Ryno Sports Podcast, and the first one of this new year. Hope you guys had a happy new year, and I know I did. It was pretty fun. Played a lot of Call of Duty and just kind of sat around, watched some bowl games. I was probably one of the few guys that did it, and I'm going to talk about that on another podcast, just because I'm waiting to see what the official ratings are for the national championship game. But a little side note on that, it was pretty bad. They lost 40% of the viewership from last year just because they played them on New Year's Eve instead of New Year's. But once again, listen to that in the future, in a future podcast. I have a lot of good topics to talk about this week. Like I said, it's the first week of January, so I'm talking about the last week of December 2015. And the first thing I want to talk about is an actual sport that's not going on, and that's in the MLB. Chapman, who consistently throws about 102, 103. He's one of the better pitchers in the MLB currently. He got traded from the Cincinnati Reds to the Yankees. He was rumored to go to many different teams. He had a couple trades set up, one to the Dodgers, and I can't think of the other one. Oh, the Marlins were trying to get him too, and it fell apart because he had a domestic violence thing happen that kind of came to the forefront of, I guess, during the trades talks, and he was kind of casting shadows for that. And so the Dodgers backed out of that trade, and I think the Marlins did too. But the Yankees actually pulled the trigger, which isn't really that surprising for them, getting a big-name pitcher. He is in the last year of his contract, so he will be a free agent next year, so I'm going to be interested to see the Yankees try to re-sign him, or what happens next year with that. But this means two different things for both these teams. By both the teams, that means the Reds and the Yankees. With the Reds, it means that they're going all in for a full rebuild of their team. They traded Todd Frazier as well. They're also looking to trade Brandon Phillips. They had to trade for him to go to the Nationals, but that fell through. And then they're trying to trade Joey Votto, kind of, not really, but they kind of are. Kind of deal. I think that they might gonna try and trade him, but he's also their franchise centerpiece, so I don't know who would take him or what they're gonna actually do there. It's gonna be really interesting to see what happens on that front. Then with the Yankees, they're trying to, I guess, limit the number of innings that their starting pitching has. With Nathan Eovaldi, who was really good after the sixth inning, or in the first 6 innings, and then he kind of dwindles down. CC Sabathia's losing his stamina. He's really good up until the 6th too, and then they dwindle down, and a couple of those other pitchers. But what's really interesting about this is that the Yankees already had an established closer in Dylan Betances, and then they had another one, and they also have Andrew Miller on there too, and he's a really good relief pitcher. He was their closer last year. And they just have really good depth in their bullpen, and that's what I think they were going for, trying to mimic what the Royals did. So I think this is kind of a win-win trade. I don't know who the prospects were that the Reds got back, mainly because I think 2 of them were players to be named later, and the other one wasn't really a big-name prospect. But in addition to that, the Yankees also got Starlin Castro from the Cubs to play second base alongside their young shortstop Didi Gregorius, and I think that their middle infield's really set now with those two, and then they have their backing and their pitching, so I think that they're going to be an interesting team to watch this year, and I think that they're going to have a great year, especially being the Yankees. They have to in that NL East. It's not very good. They have really the Blue Jays to contend with. That's about the only team that's really good in that division. Red Sox might be good, but they're really a hit-and-miss team, so that's my thought on the Chapman trade. So moving on to the NFL, they had their first coach fired this week, as Chip Kelly of the Eagles was fired just a few days on Wednesday, which is a week before when they're usually fired, which is called Black Monday, which is the first Monday after the end of the NFL season. And I wanted to kind of preview that a little bit, but I'm going to talk about who was actually fired, which was Chip Kelly first. He is the former Oregon Duck coach. He was running the spread offense, running fast pace, all that, like up tempo. He's the guy for offense. Coming out of the college ranks, he kind of set up that whole non-pro system kind of run quarterback, run everything, speed option, read option, all that stuff. I think he could be really good. He was just kind of set up to fail there with being a GM too, and I think there's a lot of good coaching options, like locations that he can go to and be a good coach. And I'm going to talk about him briefly here. I think there's one that I want to rule out real quick, and that's the Giants. I've heard this name tossed around a lot by some NFL analysts on ESPN and Fox Sports and all that, and I don't think that's a good option for him. He doesn't have a good quarterback in Eli, and they're going to have all the good mobile quarterbacks will be gone by then. So I don't know what he's thinking or what people are thinking with him going there, but I don't really see it being a good job for him. So I have 5 names right here that I'm going to talk about real quick. And first one is the 49ers. Obviously, they still have a coach with Tom Sula still there, and he could. It's only his first year, so he could be gone. You could keep him. I don't see them really moving him, releasing him or anything yet. But I still think he'll be there after Black Monday. If he's not, Chip Kelly would be able to slide right in there and take Colin Kaepernick and put him back in the starter role, or Blaine Gabbert, who's athletic enough to play that quarterback position in the new era. And another thing, speaking of Colin Kaepernick, I think wherever Kaepernick goes would be a good fit for Chip Kelly as well. That wasn't really a team I had on there, but I wanted to throw that out, talking about the 49ers. So I don't think Kaepernick's days are numbered at the 49ers quite yet. He just has to have a good coach that doesn't really want to give up on him quite as quickly as Tom Sula did. The next team that I have is kind of a shocker team. It's the Miami Dolphins, who fired their coach midseason this year and had Dan Campbell, the whole hoorah thing. And I'm just saying this because they haven't hired Campbell completely, and I still think they will, or at least someone with his background with defense and stuff, because they have one of the premier defensive tackles in the league, and they need to work on their offense too. So they need to get at least an offensive coordinator that's really good. But if they get Chip Kelly, I think Ryan Tannehill would be a perfect quarterback for his system, which is running quarterback with a big arm that can just throw it down the field. I mean, he's got to work on his accuracy, obviously, but still he can throw it pretty far down the field and get the running ability on there too. So I think that's a great option. And then I'm going to move on to another AFC team. Well, I guess they're all AFC teams I have left. But the Colts are a surprise pick here as well, just because Andrew Luck isn't considered the premier considered the premier running quarterback, but he's super athletic. I think he ran faster than RG3, and that's another guy Chip Kelly can go coach wherever he goes as well. And I think Andrew Luck, going back to the Chip Kelly to the Colts, he could be a good quarterback for this Chip Kelly system. He just needs to have linemen around him to be going on to that next level. I think Chip can come in with an offensive scheme to put linemen different ways and stuff like that, just to make Andrew Luck feel a little bit more comfortable in the pocket. And I just think it's a good fit there, because the Colts are expected to fire Pagano if they don't get a playoff berth, which I talked about how they could get a playoff berth in my other podcast released on, I think it was Thursday, where I talked about all the playoff, how the playoffs could shake out this year. So I have 2 teams left, and I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because they're kind of obvious. The first one, I guess I'm going to go with the less obvious one first, and that's the Cleveland Browns. They have Johnny Manziel as the incumbent right now coming into the next year, and he's the prototypical Chip Kelly quarterback. Can run, has a good arm, and he can scramble, knows how to play. He's got good football IQ, just not good social IQ, and I think Kelly could bring that out of him, just be a little bit smarter with his decisions and stuff. And I think if he goes to the Browns, he'll have a good defense and a good defensive coordinator already built into there, and he can have a little bit more control and say over the players he wants, but not as much as he had in Philadelphia, obviously. So I think that would be a good choice for him, especially with Manziel and a couple other key pieces there. He needs to get some wide receivers, but if he gets Josh Gordon back, him and Manziel will be really good together. And I think Kelly, Manziel, Gordon, and then they got a good couple running backs too that are not too bad. So I think that could be a good one for him to go as well. And then the last one, which is probably the most obvious choice, is the Tennessee Titans. This could be Chip Kelly's real mainstay because Mariota's already there. They got a good defense behind him, and Mariota was his quarterback back in college. So I think he knows what makes Mariota tick, makes Mariota play well, how to scheme around Mariota and all that stuff. It'd be just absolutely perfect for both of them. And if he does go to Tennessee, they could be a playoff team next year, I think, if not a division winner next year. And those are those 5 teams I think Chip Kelly could go. I'm going to talk about just real quick a couple of the things to look forward to on Monday, the 4th, which is Black Monday. Will Pagano actually be fired, or is that just smoke in the mirrors? What will Tom Coughlin of the New York Giants do? Will he retire? Will he stay coaching next year? Will he be an advisor next year? That could be another thing too. Well, what's his plan? I think the Giants are going to find out. Are they going to fire him if he doesn't retire? Things like that. And then there's already 3 jobs open, so there's probably already been some interviews for those 3 jobs, and those jobs are the Dolphins, the Titans, and the Eagles. Did they come up with anything new, or do they wait till this day to see what happens? Do they try to say that their interims are open, their interim coaches, or they're not going to keep them as a full-time coach? What's their plan there? And then obviously, the Browns going to replace their coach. That's like a staple for Black Monday every other year. It's kind of ridiculous, but same with Jim Caldwell at the Lions. Is he gonna stay for another year? They're gonna give him another shot, or is he gonna get fired? That one could go either way. I don't really know. They have good pieces around Stafford and Calvin Johnson, but they need to figure out how to do something on the offensive side when Johnson isn't really open or having a good week. And then what does Sean Payton's future hold? And he's the Saints coach. He's been rumored in a lot of trades and a lot of the team just cutting him, seeing where he could go. He's one of the better coaches, smarter coaches, but I don't really know what the Saints are planning to do there. If they're just going to rebuild completely behind Garrett Grayson instead of Drew Brees and all that. I guess we're going to find out on Monday with that one. And then McCoy from the Chargers, who was the Broncos offensive coordinator a couple of years ago. What's the Chargers' plan for him? Are they going to keep him, or are they going to go with someone new? Or are they, because if they move to Los Angeles, they just blow it up completely, get rid of Rivers, get rid of keep Keenan Allen and a couple other young guys, or what's the plan with them? And then the last one, which is really interesting to me, is what happens to Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. He's one of the better coaches in the league, but he also has a lot of mistakes, so I don't know what their plan is. I mean, they were expected to go to the playoffs the last couple of years, and they've been right on the brink. I mean, that's obviously because their defense isn't the best. They've lost Polamalu, they've lost a lot of playmakers over the year, they've gotten older. What's their plan is kind of what I'm thinking with the Steelers. And then I'm going to end this off here with a couple names to think about, or things to think about more of in the future, and just basically in their job searches for these teams. There's three names and then one kind of scenario I'm going to talk about real quick. The first name I got is Adam Gase. He's the Bears and former Broncos offensive coordinator. What happens to him? Does he stay as that offensive coordinator, or does he go to be a head coach? I think he's on the up and up. He's an upcoming future coach in the NFL. I think he's going to be really good if he gets to go somewhere. Then another name that I've seen thrown around a little bit is David Shaw from Stanford. He worked out really well the last Stanford coach going to the NFL worked out really well with Harbaugh going to the Niners, but can Shaw replicate that? Does he want to go? He's still got another year of McCaffrey. There's a lot of different variables there, and I don't see him going anywhere, but it's a good name to throw out there just to kind of mess with people. There's a couple other college coaches like Saban, but I don't really see him leaving. And then there's another one here, Mike Shanahan. I've heard he wants to come out of retirement and continue or start coaching again, and I don't see why he can't. But I think I don't see a really big scenario. Maybe the Giants he could go and coach, but I don't know. I don't really see that happening. That's more you'd have to have the perfect scenario for him, and I don't really see that. Then the last one is the scenario, like I said before, and that's Kevin Sumlin of Texas A&M to Cleveland. That's assuming Chip Kelly doesn't go there, kind of deal. And I think this is a great thing for both of them, because like with Chip Kelly and Mariota, Sumlin was a coach for Manziel in college. He knows what he's doing. He knows what makes Manziel tick. He knows how to keep him in line. He knows how to do all this with Manziel. So he could turn Manziel into a really good quarterback right now, not maybe in a couple of years. It's just going to be really interesting to see if he throws his name in the hat or what goes on there. And I think that this might be the most interesting Black Monday in recent years for the NFL. So keeping on the breaking news of the week for the NFL, there was a report by Al Jazeera that came out that said a lot of NFL and MLB players took and bought HGH from a certain person, and in the name there's a bunch of names thrown out there that I was kind of interested in, and I'm just gonna list those off. That's Peyton Manning, Clay Matthews, Julius Peppers, James Harrison, Ryan Howard of the Phillies in the MLB, and Ryan Zimmerman of the Washington Nationals in the MLB as well. And they all said that they didn't really take them, but they at least bought them. They had no proof of them taking it, but it's assumed that they took it. And obviously that timing of that is really weird because it came out right before Christmas. And I don't really see why they're coming out with this now. And some of the players that are named with it are kind of weird because, like, James Harrison has never been really linked to any of that. Clay Matthews kind of has, but not really. Same with Julius Peppers. And then Ryan Howard and Ryan Zimmerman have really never been listed with that either. But if I really think, I'm starting to think about it a little bit right now, and Ryan Howard and Ryan Zimmerman took a nosedive in their production recently, and they could really, it kind of looks like it with like Barry Bonds, where he was hitting 70 homers in 1 year, then down to 40, then down to like 20. Then the year after, he just completely broke down. It's kind of like on that progression. And I'm not saying that these guys took it at all. I'm saying, what's wrong with these guys? If they, like, there's got to be another source that's saying, or not saying, but like there's an outside way of proving that there's something wrong with them. That why are they deteriorating this fast? These guys were young studs just like 4 or 5 years ago. Howard's case 7, 8 years ago. But I don't really get that one. That one really confuses me. I mean, it could make sense. I could see it. But why are they... I don't see any of those... Those are two of the better guys in the MLB, and I don't really see them trying to cheat the system like Barry Bonds or McGwire or Sosa or any of them. And they're not really big enough names to. They've had the production before. They've had the production in high school and in college. I don't really get that one. I might be wrong, but I mean, I don't really see it at the moment. At least considering this. And then going over to the NFL side of this, like I said, James Harrison and Peppers, I don't see them doing it. They are kind of older, but they're keeping their production the same of what they've been over their career. They've been pretty consistent, but I don't really see them linking that to HGH. That's kind of... I don't see that. They're two upstanding guys. I mean, yeah, the Steelers are the Steelers. They've done cheap stuff in the past. Then Peppers has been on a lot of teams, and he's kept this consistency for almost 18 years now. How can you keep that up? And I think it's just like, it's part of the game, but I don't think that it's really... I think that this is just kind of like a distraction for something, which I have a little theory on here. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But just want to talk about these last two names here. Clay Matthews, he's never really been linked to this. He's been pretty much consistently really good since he came into the league. Well, I guess since he became a starter in the league, but still. And then there's Manning. He's probably one of the most outstanding guys in the league. I mean, yeah, he could have done it, and I'd believe it just because he came back from neck surgery. And I mean, yeah, but my thought on that is that if he did take it, why can he still not feel his fingertips? Shouldn't that have helped to feel his fingertips? That's just my opinion on it. That's why I think he didn't do it. I mean, he should have been fully healed. If he came back fully healed, yeah, something would be up. But since it took him like a year and a half to come all the way back full circle from this and be completely, or it was actually almost 2 years. But anyway, he came all the way back full circle from this, and he still can't feel his hands, doesn't have full mobility and all that. That doesn't really bode well for that HGH thought on that. And I just want to talk about this real quick. I do think HGH is a problem. It's a little bit more, but it is a steroid, but it's also a lot of people are doing it, and it makes the games a little bit better. Like, that's what you kind of go to see is the big hits and stuff, and it's more of for player protection, but I could see it being like limited in the NFL, but in the MLB and stuff, and I'm going to put out a full kind of blog or thought about this, is that HGH isn't really a bad thing for at least the MLB, and NFL is a completely different story. For the MLB, it's not really a bad thing, though. And I encourage you to look forward to that. It's going to come out probably right before the MLB season, right before spring training, sometime around then, or maybe a little bit after the Hall of Fame. It really depends. It'll come out here soon. But yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about with the names. But going back to what I said about the interesting timing part of it, I think it's really more of a distractor. I said this before just a couple of minutes ago, that this is an interesting timing of it. Why are they put it out right before Christmas kind of deal? I think it's more of a distractor thing. And the reason I think it is because it came out either the same day or the night before the movie Concussion came out. And that thing had a bunch of hype, or Concussion, I should say, had a bunch of hype, and a bunch of people wanted to go see it. And then it barely grossed anything. It had, I think, like $16 million box office, and that's really nothing, because it's like Star Wars had like 50 or 60 million, and Concussion with 16 is almost nothing compared to that. So I think the NFL threw this out there just to like get everyone glued to their TV. Oh, big name Peyton Manning, he's under investigation. We've got to keep this up to minute. Then he came out and put out a thing pretty quickly, just so the ESPNs and talking heads could talk about it. And then, so that extended it even longer. People are talking about that instead of the movie Concussion. So they completely forget about Concussion. And then they also have Al Jazeera pull out a retraction, and then they have them talk about the other guys and all this stuff. Just the whole thing just seems like kind of a cover-up kind of deal for this Concussion movie, because NFL obviously doesn't want anyone to see it, because it's highlighting the bad part of the NFL, which is the truth about what's so bad about that league, which is just kind of you're getting people almost killed every day, and it's really bad. I haven't seen the movie personally, but I've read some reviews, and I think it should be a must watch. And I think the NFL was kind of like, oh hey, we don't want this movie to be really shown. We're gonna take the money from the ads and stuff, but we're gonna cover it up so no one really goes and see it. And then the last thing I heard from a bunch of ESPN and Fox Sports 1 and a couple other guys, they say they're making steroids and like sticky gloves, the new type of gloves equivalent, and I really don't see that. Yeah, the sticky gloves kind of help, but the more of a factor of what goes into a catch is how big your hands are. Like me, I have pretty small hands, so I can't really catch anything. Like one-handed, I should say. I can make good catches and stuff, but like I can't go out there and go have Logan Thomas, or like I just bring him up because I remember he threw like 68 mile per hour football in the combine kind of deal. I can't have any of those NFL guys go out there and just throw bullets at me and catch it even with those gloves on. Yeah, I might get lucky and get a couple two-handers or get some one-handed catches, or I'll never catch it one-handed like Odell Beckham, but that's not the point. I'm saying that those things aren't comparable, just because if you put just a normal person who's never had the experience of playing football or being a wide receiver kind of deal into that situation, even if you did give him sticky gloves and you gave the wide receiver no gloves, they're still the wide receiver, professional guy or college, doesn't matter, will still make that catch while the normal guy won't. Like, that professional guy will catch it 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times, and the normal Joe might catch it twice, maybe, at least once, but not consistently is what I'm trying to say, and that's just a bad comparison. I don't really like seeing it. But so I guess what I'm going to sum this up by saying is that this HEH report, it's really just a cover-up for concussion in the NFL, is kind of rigged, I guess. I don't really want to say rigged yet, but they're kind of covering some stuff up and trying to make it so that no one really sees the underlying themes of the NFL. So to end the last segment, I kind of said that I didn't want to say the NFL was rigged yet, but I do want to say that now, just because I think it's basing it off of what I talked about last week, and I got a comment from one of the listeners who said that to look into this more, and there's a guy, John Tucci, I don't know how to say his last name, it's really Tui, that's it, Brian Tui, that's his name. And he said to look into that and see if the NFL is rigged, and they're trying to basically get some people to watch the games and stuff like that. And I want to expand on that a little bit more. And I think that the NFL referees kind of are just the underlying, not underlying, but like the tip of the iceberg on this whole scheme to like basically have NFL rigged and stuff. But I'll start with the referees here. As I watched one interview with Mr. Tui, and I didn't read the books or read anything else he said. I just wanted to get a little bit of a baseline of what he was saying. And what he was talking about was that he did some investigation with the FBI, and he found that the NFL was trying to set up games and basically have them have an outcome that's favorable to them and for the news media people like ESPN and all them, just so they could have bigger stories and stuff like that. And I do think that's a kind of a thing, but not quite. I think it's more of the NFL is more of just a show, and the players are actors in it. Like, I think that if you have a skilled enough person coming out of the NFL, or NCAA and college football, they could do about anything you ask them to. So let's say, for example, the Patriots and the Colts are going to play again in the Deflategate rematch, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about storylines and stuff here in just a few moments. But they're playing in that rematch. You have a full healthy Patriots team, and then you have a full healthy Colts team. Like, just basically their game that they played this year, just say it was completely healthy. Everything's on the table for that. Say they wanted to be like, hey Brady, we won't suspend you for the year if you only win this game by 4, or something along those lines. They tell them to like only win by this much or lose it or something like that. And let's say they say lose or win only by 4, and they tell Andrew Luck that. They'll be like, hey, you're going to lose this game, but we want you to go out with an injury so you can keep your team relevant, just in the headlines and stuff. And with that, I'm going to stick on this Andrew Luck thing real quick. What great story was it, or how great of a story was it that Matt Hasselbeck, 40-year-old Matt Hasselbeck, comes into the games for the Colts, plays, gets 4 straight wins, and then Andrew Luck comes back too early and really hurt still, and then they put Hasselbeck in there. How great of a storyline is that for the NFL? I don't see that really being natural. That could be more set up than anything. Just staying on this conspiracy theory here. And I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think that the NFL is just kind of like any other sports league and any other thing. They're looking for their money. They're trying to make that money, and they're doing a good job at it. They could just be saying, hey, hey refs, we're not gonna say anything bad about you. We're not gonna do anything bad about you. We'll give you extra money just to have bad calls this game. Just completely and utterly bad calls. Just like you didn't see it. You got to make this call at this time. The players know, or the coaches know which play to call. And when you see this play, you got to make this call, kind of deal, and you'll get a little bit extra cash on it for it. And it's really sad if they have to resort to that. But I mean, that's kind of I've seen a lot of people criticizing the NFL referees, like the ESPNs and the BS reports and all these other, just the sports guys. And I even did it. I am guilty of it too. But the NFL's really never came out and said anything about him. They've never been like, oh, hey, yeah, they're doing a bad job. We're going to work on it to fix it. We're going to do this to fix them. We're going to do this. We're going to go train all our refs even more. We're going to do this and this. They'd have no definitive plan. They've said nothing about him, which makes me believe that there's something bigger picture here that we as fans are missing. And it's really scary to me. I'm thinking about it, and I don't really know what it is. I don't know what the NFL's doing, what their ultimate end goal is. I'm kind of interested to see what it is, but we may never know. I think Goodell's evil enough and money hungry enough, and as well as all the other owners, to basically agree to this idea that, oh hey, let's straight up just throw each game, can make all these games, I'll do this to make these storylines really good, and all this stuff, and just keep the money flowing, kind of deal. But and I just talked about storylines earlier, and I just said it again. But I think that some of there's like the storylines, like Ray Rice punching his girlfriend, obviously, and then there's like Greg Hardy, and then there's other things that just keep people talking about the NFL. Like, I'm talking off season, obviously, not in the season, but kind of in the season. I'm focusing primarily on off season stuff here. And like, do they do this? Like, do they say let's take the Ray Rice thing for example. I mean, you can see that he did it. And I don't think he's that bad of a guy, but did the NFL just be like, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of money to not play football, so you stay healthy for a little bit? So you're one of our premier backs in the league, but all we need you to do is punch your wife. They tell the wife this, and they basically have it all set up. And they're like, oh, hey, we're going to say all this stuff. We have a plan. Just trust us. You're not going to get in any real trouble here. And that just kept, like, that thing lasted for like a month and a half. That lasted a long while. And I really don't want to say that the NFL told him to do this, because I don't know what to say about that. I just would. That'd be the craziest thing of all time if they told their own guys to beat women and stuff. But nonetheless, like, it could be about anything. Like, let's change the topic to Deflategate on this. Let's say they wanted to not really hurt Tom Brady, but they wanted to keep the news lines. They wanted to keep the headlines for the next, like 3-4 months until the season starts, basically from February until October, or not October. They start in August, so from February to August, they wanted to keep the NFL in the storylines, and they had no real way of doing it. So they started off with this Deflategate, and they occasionally dropped pieces of evidence or news. Like, they started out with the report, and then, they started out with like the Colts saying, "Hey, this happened," and then people talked about the things. And that never really, nothing else came out till after the Super Bowl, and then things like that. And I think that's more of a like setup for us, not really a sting operation against the Patriots, but against the fans. They're trying to make it so we don't see that the NFL actually set this up just to keep storylines for how it's still going on. Actually, they just kept dropping more evidence and evidence and evidence one after another, that kind of made us keep talking about Deflategate in the NFL, and then that turned into, in about June, that kind of turned into people talking about, oh, what's Patriots going to do? Are they come back on a vengeance? And what's their, I guess, how mad are they going to be off this and that kind of deal? And that just made us keep talking about the NFL more. And I think that's not as big of a deal. I'm going to stay away from the Ray Rice thing. I might publish my piece from last September, or September of 2 years ago now, 2014, about where Ray Rice was an opinion piece. And I just think that they're kind of building the hype for their season and behind the star players, and that's kind of evidenced by that Deflategate and Tom Brady. They're keeping Tom Brady's name in the headlines. They're keeping the NFL in the headlines and all that stuff, and it's really sad if that's what they have to do to get their money, keep their money, but that's all that's this really sports and media in this world are really coming to, is who's got more money than another, and it's getting really, really pathetic. So as I said at the beginning of this podcast, talking about New Year's, I spent my New Year's Eve watching basically the Alabama-Clemson game, and I didn't watch the, or not Alabama-Clemson, sorry, the Alabama-Michigan State, but I didn't really watch the Oklahoma-Clemson, because I was really asleep the whole time. I was after my food coma, and I kind of just fell asleep all the way through it. But I do want to talk about that a little bit, about the playoffs, and then I did watch on New Year's the regular, the other bowls. And I do want to talk about real quick, just before I talk about the recaps from those games and give a little bit of a prediction for the the college football final. I want to say this one thing about the playoff. They need to do two things. They need to not schedule games on New Year's Eve, because no one really watched them, compared to last year at least. And my theory on that was, it's not really ESPN's fault, but it's more of they're trying to keep the integrity of when the bowls were. So like last year they had the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, which were both New Year's Day games. Those were both the college football semifinals. And then the other two, the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. The Orange Bowl were the New Year's Eve games. Sorry about that, I dropped my mic. And and those were the New Year's. Those the same games were the same days this year, and they've always been on the same days. But I think that they just had to keep the integrity of the time, and rotating between 6 bowls with the college football playoff isn't really going to work, because every 3 years they're going to have that rotation where it's going to be like, so last year was the Cotton or the Fiesta and the Rose. This year is the Orange and the Cotton Bowl, and the next year, I don't know what next year is, honestly, I can't think of it, but next year is another two bowls, and then it's going to go back. So 2017 is going to be those next 2 bowls, and then 2018 is going to be the first 2 again, the Rose and the Cotton, and that'll be on New Year's again. So that's how they're trying to keep that integrity of that when the bowls are played, and that kind of screwed them up and kind of messed up their scheduling and all that. And that's not really anyone's fault besides the committee, who needs to figure out, hey, we need to play college football playoff games on New Year's Day, not New Year's Eve. Obviously keep the Rose Bowl there, but you could flex one of the other games that are played on New Year's to another day. You can move them, you can shuffle around, but keep New Year or the Rose Bowl on the same day, just because it's always played on New Year's Day at the end of the day. And I think they need to figure out a way to do that. I could think of it, but I'd have to have a lot of looking and shuffling, and every year it'd have to be different kind of deal. But that's the first thing. And then the second thing, they need to expand to 6 teams, as I was showed in the Rose Bowl and I think it was Fiesta, that basically by Ohio State and Stanford. Stanford completely dismantled a overrated Iowa team, and Ohio State kind of lit up that Notre Dame team. And I think those two should have been in the playoff. If we had 6 teams, you could have the 2 byes, and then the 2, just a 3-week playoff basically, and I think it would have been good. Could have had Ohio State against whatever number 3 would be. That'd be Michigan State, and then you'd have Oklahoma and Stanford, or flip-flop Ohio State and Stanford. That's really whichever one you want. And I think it would have been really good for those teams because they all four of those bowls were kind of just blowouts. Actually, all six of them were kind of blowouts. And I think it was just kind of just a weak year for bowls all together. I'm watching the Oregon TCU game as I'm recording this, and that game's really good right now. It's in double overtime. Oregon just kicked a field goal, and I think if they just went up to six teams, that'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bowls. You could do that, and you could have the sixth one be whatever, and you just keep the 5 the same each year, and that kind of deal. Obviously, you can't do that until the bowl contracts run out for the playoff, but still. So, going right into the recaps, I'm going to start with the game I didn't really watch first. This is all really stat-based. This was the Clemson-Oklahoma game. Clemson won 37-17. It was kind of interesting looking at the stats. Baker Mayfield stats-wise, had a better game just because he had more passing yards. He had like 340. He also had 2 interceptions, though. And that kind of interceptions always kill the team, kill the drives, all that kind of stuff. And that's just kind of not a good thing to do, is just throw picks. And obviously he's kind of young. I think he's a junior. He could get better next year, and Oklahoma could be right back in here again. But Clemson, really, what they did was they owned the time of possession the whole game, and they were a little bit better of a rushing team than Oklahoma's. They basically have 2 or 3 guys that can rush at any given play with Deshaun Watson, and then their running backs, and they have a couple like fly patterns with their wide receiver kind of stuff. And it's gonna be really interesting to see what they do in the finals here. But I'm seeing the one big stat that kind of stood out. Well, 2 big stats that kind of stood out to me, at least as the team stats, was that Oklahoma was 5 for 13 on third down, while Clemson was 9 for 19. And converting third downs are obviously a good thing, and you need to do that to keep in games and do all that stuff. And sticking on the third down kind of train, Oklahoma had 4 3-and-outs, and 3 of those were in the second half. And why I mentioned that 3 of them were in the second half is because they went into the second half leading, and then ended up not getting shut out in the second half. And Clemson throughout the whole game had 1 3-and-out. So that's kind of how they can determine or kept the time of possessions. They didn't really go 3-and-out very much in the game, obviously. And Deshaun Watson kind of owned the game. He had 330 total yards, and that was only 40 less than Oklahoma had as a team, because Clemson had 530 and Oklahoma had 378. So Watson kind of showed out and did a lot of things for his team. And his ability as a passer and runner, he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the NCAA right now. At least I believe so, as I see it. And that's going to really hurt. That really hurt Oklahoma because they never really seen that this year. They saw Trayvon Boykin, who's really good, but he's not as good of a passer as he is runner. I mean, he's a good passer. Obviously, he's in college passing, but he's not like a top tier passer. And then they got there's no one really in the Big 12 that can really do both. That Texas Tech quarterback might, but not as well as Watson can do it. So it's all that, I guess. But another thing I saw was that Shaq Lawson, their best defender, Clemson, got hurt. He's gonna be the key to their defense against Alabama in the final game, just because he's a really good run stuffer, and they need to really stop Derrick Henry and kind of limit what Jake Coker does. And a couple of things that just little questions that I'm gonna try and what I'm gonna be looking for in that finals game is, can Clemson stop Henry with or without Shaq Lawson? And then what Alabama does is they kind of control the quick hikes, or they don't control it. They do quick hikes after big plays, so they run up to the line real quick and then run a play just to kind of get either an offsides or catch them off guard and get a touchdown kind of deal. Can Clemson stop that? What's Watson's ability to be a dual threat against that that good Alabama defense? Is Clemson really fast enough, especially at the defensive backs in the back seven, to keep up with Calvin Ridley of the Alabama, who I'm going to talk about here in a second, and Kenyon Drake, who's the change of pace speed back at Alabama? And then who guards O.J. Howard on Clemson? That's going to be really the big question there. I'm going to talk about that why right now. So I'm moving on to the Alabama-Michigan State game. I did watch this game all the way through, took a lot of notes. I have 2 pages of notes here. And Bama did end up winning 38-0. And so going quarter by quarter here, in the first quarter I really started to notice that Michigan State's right side of their line looked really overmatched and not really ready for this game. And they didn't really look good to me, and they wasn't really they looked really overmatched is the best way to say it, I guess. There's no other better way to say it. And then obviously that quarter is very defensive. I think it was 0-0 coming out of it. And Bama really set up their passing game in that quarter and said that they're going to use swing passes and screen passes to get the ball down the field more and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they do in the championship game. So on to the second quarter. And in that second quarter, scoring really got going. And that's about all I could say about this. Derrick Henry broke the 2,000-yard mark in this quarter. And I'm going to do a little bit more of a Heisman comparison in a couple weeks here. But he really didn't look that good. And he didn't really run that well. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here. But one thing I did take away from this quarter was O.J. Howard is probably one of the best tight ends in the nation, if not the best. He's just big, explosive, can catch the ball really fast. I don't see any way that anyone can really block him at the next level. It's going to be interesting to see what he does in the NFL draft, in the NFL. And the biggest stat from this is that Michigan State was -9 in rushing yards in the half, and you can't really do that and win the game. It's really hard to do. So going on to the second half, the Michigan State consistently stopped the run, something most Alabama teams or opponents couldn't do, and that kind of just messed up Derrick Henry. But as it kind of went on, Henry didn't wear him down, but rather the speed of who's the other one? Kenyon Drake wore him down, so it was kind of interesting. But Calvin Ridley stepped up and became the playmaker. He burned MSU on a couple big plays for 50 yards throughout the game. He looks really fast, his big play ability, good catching ability, but one kind of big thing that I noticed was he's older. He's 21 years old as a freshman, a true freshman. That's kind of worrisome and kind of cheating, I'd say, but that's another time. Jones got hurt in this. I can't think of his Cyrus Jones. He is the punt returner for Alabama. He got hurt this quarter. He did come back, but that's something to note that he did get hurt. And then there was a couple big missed penalties that Jacob Coker was running out of bounds, and he threw it away so he wouldn't lose yardage. But it was basically an intentional grounding, and they should have called it, but they didn't. And then later in this quarter, Cyrus Jones came back, returned a touchdown off a punt. There's a bunch of missed tackles and a lot of stuff that was bad from Michigan State that I saw in that. It wasn't really good for them. And then moving on to, I guess at the very end of this quarter, they started to lose confidence in themselves. Michigan State did, and they kind of just started to cave, make mental mistakes, and just break down. And then, like I said, Derrick Henry kind of took over in the fourth quarter and started running all over Michigan State's defense. He's faster and more of a multi-cut back, and I think he's going to do a lot better than Henry will. And he's just faster and a lot better. So I guess the key points out of this was that MSU's line looked awful and they couldn't establish a run game. And then the receivers had a bunch of drops too. That didn't really help. Then Derrick Henry only had 75 yards on 20 attempts. And then he had 2 touchdowns, but they weren't really jaw-dropping touchdowns. They were 11 yards and 1 yard. That's nothing really to be amazed by, so I didn't really understand that one. And then Jacob Coker, I don't know why people are freaking out why he's like the best of all time kind of thing. He's the traditional Bama game manager. He threw a bunch of quick passes, screens, and swing routes, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's the best of all time," but he's just traditional Bama quarterback who's throwing these little dink and duck plays and throws one deep occasionally. I think he only had like 3 passes over 35 yards, and I don't see why he's that good. I mean, he is good, but he's no better than any other quarterback in the nation. He's average at most. And I don't really... The only thing I see here is that Michigan State, it really didn't have a good line. Like I said, but Connor Cook really does look NFL ready right now. I could see him stepping right into the NFL and becoming a starter like right away, or being a backup that comes in, kind of like what Kirk Cousins' predecessor did. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about here, well, last 2 things. Michigan State was kind of destined to lose. They were pretty one-dimensional on offense. They didn't really have a run game or anything. And that made them do mental mistakes and play really tired on the offensive side or defensive side. Then the last thing, 3 weeks is way, or it might have been 4. The amount of time that they had off was way too much to give to Saban and other coaches like Urban Meyer and these coaches that are just like really smart and know what they're doing. That's way too much time to give to them. And like David Shaw, Urban Meyer, Saban, all that, that's just way too much time. They need to figure something out, like either cut that time down or do something. There needs to be some way to kind of prevent that. And that's just my honest recap of this game. I see. So obviously it's Bama versus Clemson. The keys to that game are going to be what can Clemson do defensively against Derrick Henry, and can they figure out Jake Coker? Shouldn't be that hard. And then is Deshaun Watson going to do Deshaun Watson things and be a dual threat kind of attack that Bama's had trouble with in the past couple years? Or will he just try to be one-dimensional and shut down because he's a true sophomore? Or is he going to step up and have that confidence to come into that game? And then the last thing would probably be, what does Alabama's defense do to that? And you can't really pinpoint that one, but that's kind of along the same lines as what will Watson do? And then who's going to utilize this time better, Dabo Swinney or Saban? And I really can't tell that. I could usually tell that by the end of the first quarter. So I guess we'll just see what happens at this game. I don't really have a prediction or anything. It's going to be interesting to see if Clemson's wide receiver and the guys that were suspended for this game come back or not, but we'll find out. As we get closer, more information always comes out, and I guess you can't really find out anything till the game's played, as I've always been told, so I guess we'll see January 11th. Now it's time for the Ryno Sports Talk Games of the Week. So I have a couple things here. I'm recording this on Saturday, so I'm not sure what the wild card games or anything are yet. I'm assuming, based on what it is right now, it's going to be Jets and Texans, I think. No, Texans, Chiefs, Bengals, Jets is what it looks like right now. On the AFC side, and the NFC side is going to be like Vikings and Packers, or Vikings, Seahawks, or Seahawks, Packers. There's a lot of scenarios there. It's just going to be interesting. I can't really predict that. But those wild card games are always really good. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who, because it's going to be the combination of the Packers, the Redskins or Washington football team, the Seahawks, and the Vikings. Some combination of those 4 are going to play. I think, and those games are always going to be good. I think Washington could do some damage depending on what their matchup is. And then the Packers against whoever, if they play the Vikings again, they just played them this week, or they're going to play them this week. And if they play the Seahawks, that's going to be a really good game. See what Aaron Rodgers can do up against the Legion of Boom. And I'm going to have a little preview coming out next week for that, so be on the lookout for that. But moving on to the 5 biggest games of the week, or 4, sorry. I have on January 4th, which is Monday, at 7 o'clock. I don't know where it's streaming or showing or anything, but Oklahoma takes on Kansas, and obviously the polls haven't come out this week, but Michigan State lost. They were the number 1 last week, and they lost. They almost lost again, so they're dropping out of number 1. Kansas was the number 2, and Oklahoma was the number 3, so it is expected that they move up 1 slot, and this game will be a 1-2 matchup. This is in Allen Fieldhouse, so, and that hasn't had a 1-2 matchup in almost 45 years, or over 45 years, and that's going to be just a really good game. I think both those programs are top-notch. Oklahoma has Buddy Hield, and he's really good. Kansas is deep, as always. They have Perry Ellis. I can't think of their backcourt right now. I'd have to look it up to find their backcourt. But anyway, they're really good, and I think that both these teams may get 1 seeds. That's really up in the air now, but I think that'll come out later in a March Madness kind of prediction deal in another podcast. So going on to the second game of the week, we have on January 5th, 7 o'clock also, is Kentucky against LSU. And LSU isn't ranked, and Kentucky is number 10 in the nation. But the reason I like this game is because LSU has Ben Simmons, who's one of the best college basketball freshmen. He's a true freshman I've ever seen, and he does it all. He's 6'10", he's like 6'10", 6'11", almost 7 foot, and he's scoring about 20 a game. He's grabbing almost 15 rebounds a game, but he's also averaging like 9.5 or almost 10 assists a game. And he's getting rebounds, he's getting blocks, he's guarding the best guys, he's jumping over everyone. He's just insanely athletic, and he should be the number 1 pick. But then Kentucky's also got another big man named Skal Labissiere, and he's just as athletic as Simmons, and, well, maybe not as athletic, but he's not as skilled either. But they're all on the same level. They're both freshmen. I think this is going to be a great matchup to see what is going to be, how does one of these guys separate from the other, and see what's going to happen there. And then I'm going to move on to January 6th. It's a NBA game, and as I was looking through the weekly schedule, I didn't see any real big-time games. I mean, the Warriors are playing games, but they're against scrubs, and I didn't really think that was I didn't think it was good to pick those guys. But I saw this one game kind of piqued my interest just a little bit. I know Russell Westbrook is having a good season this year, and him and the Thunder are playing the Grizzlies on the 6th, and I think the biggest question on this one is, can Mike Conley lock down Westbrook, or at least contain him a little bit, and what can they do with Durant on defense? And I don't see, I mean, the Grizzlies are going to stay in this because they're always a good team, but I don't know how long they're going to stay into this or what's going to go down for them. It's going to be an interesting game. Defensively, they match up pretty well, but offensively, I don't think the Grizzlies have the firepower to stay with the Thunder when Conley and a couple other guys are on the bench. So there's that. And then the last game of the week is kind of a weaker one, but it's Villanova and Butler on the 10th, and that's projected to be a top 15 matchup. And I think Villanova is always usually good during the preseason. Butler's always good, always, ever since they had Brad Stevens at coach, and he was one of the best, or they're usually one of the best teams. They go pretty deep in the tournament every year, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see what they do there, what's going to happen, that kind of deal. I don't really have a pick for this one. I haven't really watched much college basketball. I've seen a couple of Simmons these games, watched a little bit of Kansas, and not really much else. I don't really know anything. I'm going to start picking it up a little bit more out here since football's done. It's really hard with it being on other networks that I don't get at my school, but I'll figure out a way to make it work. So that's it for my games of the week, and that's it for the podcast too. If you guys enjoyed, hit the like button and subscribe. Leave some comments down below on what you guys thought. I will be doing this again where I split them up and then do one big podcast also. So I'll have 5 different videos up. If you want to see them in order, I'll have them in order. Part 1 through 5 and all that stuff. But, yep. And then so on this week's blog on rynosportstalk.wordpress.com, link in the description, you can see I had last week, I talked about a little preview for the semifinal games, but this week I'm talking about NFL playoffs and what to look forward to in it and the matchups and stuff, and that should be going up Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know what the kind of thing is, but it's going to be just the format of it, but I'm going to be previewing the playoffs, at least the wild card games, and maybe a little bit after that. It really depends. So, yep, we'll see on that, and that'll be out Thursday at rynosportstalk.wordpress.com. Link in the description again. If you guys like and enjoyed, please hit the like button, subscribe, and comment any comments you guys got. So, have a good day.